Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this session of the Explorers of the International Federation for Public History. I'm your host, Jimena Perry, and I'm very happy to have you all here. Today, I'm very happy to have a very special guest and dear friend, Jose Angel del Valle, and with him it's Aiko Hillen, who will be asking him questions after Angel's presentation. But first, I'm going to present Angel and Aiko. Jose Angel del Valle was born in Guatemala City. He's an international educator, curator, and arts administrator. With degrees from Hunter College, New York, and La Universidad Iberoamericana from Mexico City, he has held positions at the Metropolitan Museum in New York, the Museum of Modern Art in Mexico, the Southern University of China, and was an assistant to artist Ai Weiwei. In
Yes.
2012, he returned to Guatemala to teach and curate many artistic projects. In 2020, he was hired by Jahad Inunum as the executive director of the Holocaust Museum in Guatemala, which is the topic of our discussion today. And we also have with us Aiko Hillen. Aiko completed his bachelor's degree in philosophy and in history in Cologne in 2018, and he's currently finishing his master's degree in public history also in Cologne. Aiko works as research assistant at the chair of modern and contemporary history. He's also a research assistant in a project on war crimes during the German occupation of Italy. His research interests are in the Holocaust in Eastern Europe and specifically in Belarus. Last year, he won a research fellowship from the German Belarusian Historical Commission, and he's also in close contact with the NGO Jahad Inunum. So welcome both. Thank you for accepting our invitation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jimena. Thank you to the International Federation for Public History, for the group Explorers that I proudly feel part of, and to everybody, Aiko too, and everybody who is with us today. And well, let's go to our topic. Let's see if it works as I planned. I don't know if I'm sharing with you right now. Do you see any sharing, dear?
Currently, no.
Not yet? Okay.
Not yet.
Let me see. Yes, this is our topic today. Can you see that? No?
No.
I'm not sharing yet. Let's see. Okay. So I'm not sharing screen with you. Let's see if I can do this. Am I now?
Yes.
Okay.
You're sharing now.
So as you can see, this is Museo del Holocausto, Guatemala. The Museum of the Holocaust in Guatemala was founded by Jahad Inunum, which is an international association that specializes in history of the Holocaust and victims of the Holocaust by bullets, a topic that is relatively recently known when the Soviet and the German archives were finally public. You see, they have thousands of testimonies, and they have a vast bibliography and a lot of information on this very interesting topic. And yes, we owe this to someone, of course, who is Father Patrick Dubois. He is a priest, a Catholic priest, and he is the founder of Jahad Inunum, and of course, the founder of the Museum of the Holocaust in Guatemala. He is this important person because he is an inspiration for us too. It's not only about all the work that he has done, which is very remarkable, against, massive violence, genocide, negationism of the Holocaust, and his strength also strengthens us, in order to work together, an amazing person. As you can see, some of the materials that they have, some of the pictures are related to this Holocaust by bullets, you know, when you had these columns of Jews being transferred to the place of mass shootings, you know, and all these places remained unknown. The people, of course, have no names, you know, it was a difficult time in Eastern Europe. You know, it was almost triggered by the Operation Barbarossa from Hitler when he invaded the Soviet Union, you know, and we can see some of the things that for many years we didn't understand. And this image is a very clear idea of how it worked, the Holocaust by bullets, you know. Usually there was a ravine, there was some kind of natural place, or they even dig some place in order to send these columns of people we saw before and then shoot them at the place. At first they shot men, then they started shooting women and children, you know, and in this part, the Eisengruppen, you know, which was like this death group, and some collaborators, if we want to call them that way, with the Nazis, had the job done in some, I mean, they went all over Eastern Europe looking for Jews, you know, to kill. And even for one family, they would send a truck in order to exterminate the Jews. This is a very strong image. And we see how sometimes the perpetrators were not Nazis, but in many cases, of course, the commanders were Nazis, but the collaborators, the people around, the witnesses, you know, they were brought to see this happen, you know, in order to see, well, you know, fear is a factor, a human factor that has a lot of impact in the population. And the testimonies that Jihad has usually are from people who are 80, 84, 82 now. And for the first time, they speak about these horrible things they saw, either climbing on a tree or as part of the audience they brought to see all these crimes. And yeah, well, let me see. In Guatemala is this country that you can see here, next to Mexico and Belize, on Honduras and El Salvador, you know, and it's in Central America, you know, and the truth is that it was a very important historical place at some point in history. When the Spaniards, you know, colonized Latin America. But then when Guatemala started to be a republic, and later on, our relation with the Jews was always positive. I mean, we were always open to them, and we received them with open arms for many, many years, you know, and yes, there were some Nazi families also in Guatemala, very few, but they came with permission of the president at the time, you know, in the 1930s. We had a president that almost lasted the whole World War II. So he was very pro-Nazi, you know, very good friends with Hitler. He either has a letter from him, you know, congratulating him on how he's handling our country at the time. If we see, this is the old part of the city, the historical downtown of Guatemala. And yes, I'm sorry, it's not such a good picture, but we can see where the Museo del Holocausto is. It's right in the middle, you know, very close to a park. So it was a house that was chosen at the time by Yahari Nunum, by Father Patrick and Mr. Emmanuel Corte from Yahari Nunum. And they chose this house, which is a historical house, a very important house in history too. And then, of course, we went under this long restoration process in order to finally open the museum, you know. And then we started, you know, doing some research, and the house started to become a house again, a beautiful house. And yes, then after the restoration of the house, then came to adapting how to adapt it to a museum. Again, Father Patrick had the ability or the possibility to really take part into this situation. He hired a very famous museologist and curator and writer who is Edward Hillel. He lives in New York City. And he came here in order to adapt this old house into a very interactive modern museum, something that it sounds easy, but it's not easy. I mean, so it was finally done, very interesting. The house was bought in 2013, you know, and the museum opened in 2016. So 3 years of renovations and museology went through all those times. You see, well, that's my information. I don't really care about it too much. Then we can see the old house, you know, as it was when they bought it. It's relatively big. Not for a Holocaust museum, we need more space, but now it looks better. Of course, this was before the restoration, and of course we moved. And after the restoration, of course, it changed, you know, and it also got involved with the community, which was one of our goals, you know. Also, Father Devois had this wonderful alliance with the Ministry of Education of Guatemala, which included into our educational curriculum the Holocaust as a mandatory topic for ninth grade, you know. So it was very important in that case because we got a very good ally, you know. It doesn't mean that they dictate us anything. They wanted to empower their teachers who knew very, very few things about the Holocaust, you know. This is the house at night. Some of our events, yes, are at night. Then we see these ideas from Edward Hillel that he had with how to design, you know, the museum, how to create these installations, you know, some installations trying to make the Holocaust by bullets more understandable to people, you know. Then, of course, we have a mission, you know, and it's to build, yes, a better Central America with Holocaust education. And suddenly, of course, this went out of our hands when Mexico and also Uruguay and also other countries started to ask for the same thing from us. So the impact, and yes, this is Father Patrick Dubois' phrase is, what can I do, you know, as a young person in Guatemala, you know, against, you know, all these things that are familiar to us, like racism, rape, gangs, anti-Semitism, and other things that we will talk about later. The artistic concept, of course, was given Father Dubois to Mr. Hillel, you know, how to make it understandable. You know, it's very difficult for Latin America to understand what happened in Europe 70 years ago, you know. And yes, Yahari Nunum and his team, you know, they work constantly. They are still working, you know, they have a lot of field work. in Eastern Europe, trying to find more mass shooting places, trying to give memory and memorials to the victims and the respect they deserved as human beings, you know. Of course, Mr. Hillel came with this interesting idea of how to turn this old house into a very contemporary museum of the Holocaust. So we see that he has this very interesting cycle of life, death, and life, you know, in parts of the museum. Because we are a nonprofit organization and hopefully getting donors and people helping us to finish the museum, we have the death part, which is 3 rooms, and the green part, which has the memorial called the Unnameable. We will go to that later. Those are the parts which are finished, you know, at the museum. The house is finished, but the rooms, of course, have to be designed and adapted to the topics, you know. But this life, death, life means, yes, life before the Holocaust, death during the Holocaust, and then survival and life again for Jewish communities around the world and in Guatemala, of course. Here it looks a little clearer, you know, it's a blueprint of the museum. We can see the 3 rooms from the death part, you know, and there is an installation there for the Holocaust by bullets. There is one that is inspired in a phrase that said the earth moved for 3 days, you know, during those Holocaust by bullets episodes, you know. And then the idea, of course, humans did this. We have to remember that, you know, Nazis were not, definitely were not monsters, you see. Even in Nuremberg, you know, psychologists, psychiatrists made interviews, they dissected the brains, they tried to prove that they had something wrong with them. Of course, there were some psychological problems with many of them, but what I mean is they were humans, they were not Martians, you know. And what they did was this terrible thing that is one of the darkest chapters in humanity's history. You know, this is one of the projects. It's not done yet, you know, but it's one of the projects we have for the museum. As Edward Hillel's idea was, you know, and in this case, we have one of the rooms that is finished, almost finished. But it shows, you know, an installation of the Holocaust by bullets. We can see there how they digged, you know, places and how they, there are weapons there. There is a small circle over here. I don't know if you can see here where I'm trying to point, in which we have pictures of the victims. And of course, this huge mural, you know, showing a picture that we saw before, trying to illustrate the Holocaust by bullets. Also the audio, you know, you can hear, you know, the bullets and the voices. So it's a very interactive experience for people. And then we have projections and other technical, you know, things in order to make it more understandable. It looks like this more or less, you see. You can see the place where the pictures of the victims are. You can see this part where there is the installation, you know, and you can see the shovels there, you can see the bullets there, you can see the dirt, you know, and of course, at the front, you can see one of the mass shooting graves interpretation, you know. So we can see part of the same room, you know, and it's important for them to understand the elements and the context. We also have a video here of one of the executions, you know, so that you can see it. This is actually that museum, you know, and then we see, you know, all these little candles there, and they are representing, you know, the souls of the victims in that ravine or place wherever they were shot. And you can see the pictures on the left, the shovels, and of course the weapons and the clothes. As you know, they had to be nude, so it was complicated. We can see again the same room here, the installation from the other side. And the idea is to have an experience. You see, it's an audio experience, a visual experience, and an installation that gives these feelings, you know. This is the next room, you know, and we can see that on top of it, there is a map. This map is the map of Europe at the time, you know, and it shows all the mass grave places that they have found. Well, they are still finding, you know, so it's like something that is updating all the time. But we can see the magnitude of the Holocaust by bullets in Europe at the time, you know, and it's a very interesting piece of the museum, because people react and see how big, how many countries it covered, you know, and how little we knew. I mean, people usually think about Auschwitz, you know, Belzec and all these places, and they forget that around 2 million victims were killed in the Holocaust by bullets, you know. So now we see more or less how it looks, you know. Those are the pictures of survivors, and some of them were witnesses, some of them survived, but most of them are witnesses, you know, when they were children, and they are giving their testimonies. And then you have headphones so you can hear them tell you what happened that day when the Nazis came to their little villages, you know, on Eastern Europe. And this is, yes, this is like an idealistic work for, we can see there, the top is the map that we saw before. And then we have a projection of the countryside, which is actually not a countryside. It is a mass shooting grave as it looks today, you know, like the countryside. And people can sit there and they can, you know, lie there if they want and see the map. And right in front of where we are right now, there are the pictures of the testimonies and the witnesses, you know. It's a very strong room. And we can see, we use some mirrors. Of course, this was Edward's technical work. We can see the projection here, and it goes through the mirror. So when you stand there, you have this idea of being surrounded by the countryside, you know. And of course, you would not imagine where you are. People, you can see, this is Edward Hillel. I didn't know, I didn't remember he was there. He is right on top right. And we can see people, you know, looking up to the map. You see this map that we can see on the right, and shows all those little dots that, of course, represent many of the places, so many of the places where the Holocaust by bullets took place all over Eastern Europe. This is one of his, you know, ideas about the next room, the Auschwitz room. Of course, we could not leave the gas chambers uncovered, you know, because it was part of it, of course, and a very important part of it, but not the only part of it. You see my point? Yes, and there is the Auschwitz entrance. I think it's the next. Let me see. Yes, we can see how it works, the mind of an artist, you know. He started to do all these things. He thought about how to do it. He thought about what to put there at the room. And then he started creating the room, which looks like this right now, you know. You can see the Auschwitz place, the camp at the front, and then of course, it's not finished. We still need some pictures and things that go right over it. And but of course, everything is money. And of course, we work with the help of our donors. But the idea is amazing. We can see little by little how he created this idea of having these wires, finally putting the pictures of the victims, you know, of Auschwitz. Yeah, these are not, but these are Yahari pictures, but pictures from victims of Auschwitz, you know. And of course, for that, we need the help of the Auschwitz Museum or the United States Museum, which have these high resolution kind of pictures because pictures were small, you know. And this is most or more or less the general idea of the ended room, you know. And we can see there that you can see through it the entrance of Auschwitz. You can hear a train. The audio is important too. You can hear dogs, and you can see a blinding light, you know, that is part of one of the episodes of the testimonies of how some Jews came out of the train, like they couldn't see anything. They only heard dogs barking, you know, and they felt lost, you know. And the idea is to create the experience, you see. Let me see how to move this from this to the other. Sorry. We can see here the Auschwitz room as it is. Right in front of it, this is the same room. We can see a video that, of course, will be inspired on Auschwitz. And of course, up there, we could see the sign of, you know, work will make you free. That was on the camps. And on the under part, you know, down below, as they belong, there were the Nazis, you see, at Auschwitz. So those ideas were very strong. And of course, this is one of our wonderful, oh, sorry. This. Sylvia Tenenbaum is a Jewish Guatemalan artist. She made a textile kind of work, you know, inspired on the Holocaust. It's called The Unnameable, and it shows the places, you know, in little triangles. This was a handwork, you know, it was maybe made by hand by the artist and two indigenous collaborators. And she came up with this amazing work. I mean, you have to see it in order to feel it. There are bullets, skulls, a lot of significant memories, you know, the triangles, the colors, trying to cover the victims, you know, from homosexuals. Remember that not only Jewish were persecuted, but also some other people, like people with mental problems, people with different capacities or who had physical problems, the homosexuals, the Jehovah's Witnesses, of course, the gypsies. I don't know if I'm using the word right, the Romanis, you know, in this persecution, they were also victims, you know, and she's showing the whole Europe. And where it took place, we can see bullets actually put there, you know, we can see little stars. And it's a very interesting work. I could give a whole class on the Holocaust just using this amazing work, you know. And yes, it was hired by Hari Nunum, you know. There is the museum. You can see it now as it is inside, as the house, you know. And it's, yes, a neoclassical house from the 19th century, very interesting. We try to respect, of course, the patrimony and how people came to the museum, come to the museum. Well, not right now because of the COVID situation, And then we come to what happened with the COVID. You know, with the COVID, we were closed. So the question was, are we going to die as a museum, as many did, or as we were going to be kept alive as a museum? So the director of Yahari Nunum, Marco Gonzalez, he came with this wonderful idea of having these webinars online, you know, and then we had many topics, all in Spanish by people who spoke Spanish. That was one of the characteristics, you know, and this gave life to another phase of the museum. Because of course we cover Auschwitz, a place of memory, what happened, you know, we had all these people, the unnameable, the memorial of the victim of the Holocaust, how to teach the Holocaust by bullets, you know. We had all these very interesting people brought, you know, from all Europe, from even in Argentina too, you know, contemporary anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe, in Western Europe. Spain and the Jews during the Holocaust, lights and darkness, you know. And of course, we ended in October last year with football. It's very strange to sound that, I know, soccer during the Holocaust, you know. It showed this idea of dehumanization and how, yes, soccer was used as a pretext in order to do this. But it is very interesting for the young people to talk about soccer or football. So it is followed by many dynamics, you know. So it's a very interesting exhibit from Argentina. And hopefully next year we will have it at the museum in Guatemala. You know, it was. So then, of course, we participated in many things, you know, we remember it was one of the campaigns, Red Lights, which we are part of. That's the net of museums of the Shoah in Latin America, you know, and they have been very good friends with us. They are very interested in the Holocaust by bullets, you know, because they don't have that information. They don't have that much of information, you know. They have witnesses there, you know, we know that they have all these things, but they know a little about the Holocaust by bullets. So of course they started asking us for help. Again, we got to the funding part, you know. And then the educational program, that was this year, you know, it took 6 months to do. We had teachers from all over the country, you know, and it was done, yes, with the help of the Ministry of Education and the approval, of course, of them. And of course, Father Patrick Dubois, who was always like this light on us. And it was very moving how they were discovering, you know, these chapters when they saw these videos, when they even cried sometimes after these things. But of course, we didn't care about these ideas yet. We don't care about you crying the first time you see these things, because that's a natural thing, you know, and then you forget. The idea is to engage you into an action, you know, and this action has to go like your classroom should be the model, you know, the model of tolerance, you know, the model of openness, the model of respect, you know, and the model of ideas like human life is sacred and we should respect it, you know. So we do this, explaining them what the Holocaust is, where it happened, who were involved, you know, all these little concepts that maybe Europeans have clearer, in places like Guatemala are not clear at all, you know. They only think about probably the Führer and the Jews. But if you talk about a Jew in Guatemala, it's like talking about the Bible. You see, they make that relation. So little by little, we started talking about the difference between the Holocaust by bullets, well, first the Holocaust, understanding first World War One, World War Two, uh, the Holocaust, and of course the differences between, you know, the Holocaust by bullets, the ghettos, uh, the camps. It was very interesting, but of course there were answers. I mean, when you speak, people speak. And then we started with some anti-Semitic attacks, you know, little ones, little by little. You know, there was a swastika at the entrance door. We had to restore the door because it was historical patrimony. So it was a little complicated. We had phone calls, we had some hate mail. The Jewish community of Guatemala and the Embassy of Israel were involved and very, you know, helpful and collaborative with us and with Yahari Nunum, of course. Yes, then we had another swastika at the, you know, sidewalk. They broke our sign of the museum, you know, we had to change it. So then they started to appear and we were wondering where this came from. You know, now we can see this door, now it's restored. And of course we hadn't changed the sign, now it is changed. But it was very hard to understand, you see, all these little things, how this happened, why this happened in a country which historically was not anti-Semitic at all, you know, and suddenly then we start to be attacked, you know, by the same people in Guatemala, not only outside, some of them are abroad, but many are here, you know, and they were, you know, attacking us, sometimes even verbally, you know, and it was complicated for everybody to understand the nature of the attacks. You see, we are not attacking anyone. We are not pro anyone. We are an educational, a cultural, and a social museum. If you go to the Museum of the Holocaust in Guatemala, go with the idea of learning. Do not go with the idea of having a ride, because we are not a fair. I'm sorry to be that strong, you know, but some people came with the idea that this is just like a ride, you know, this is not a ride. I mean, this is a history museum, you know, and it has something to say and you have to listen to it, and hopefully you will be a different person when you come out. That's the idea of the museum. That's what I stand for, you know, and that's what I defend. So you can have there, yes, if you have your telephones, you can get the QR for the whole thing, you know, and have the presentation. And again, as I tell you, thanks to Yahari Nunum, which has been wonderful, Father Patrick Dubois, who is in my soul, and he is the reason that I accepted this. I mean, I never wanted to work in a museum again, and I thought I would never do that again because I was a curator and I was into the art world. But by knowing him, I understood and I felt, you see. And as a Latin American, and I know you, Jimena, may understand me, we act first with the heart, not with the brain, you see. So yes, we need to feel the pain, but then we have to react. And that's the idea. We make them feel, experience, but then we have to engage them into actions. You know, the campaigns at schools, for example, when we finished the educational program, were campaigns of tolerance, you know, campaigns of human rights, campaigns in which the message was life is sacred. Human life is sacred, period. I do not want to go to the sides of this interpretations of this principle, but it's our principle and we believe it, you know, human life is sacred. So thank you so much. I'm sorry, sometimes I'm a little blunt. Yes, sometimes I cry, you know, I'm very weird, you know, I'm Latin American, so I'm weird. But yeah, when I'm blunt because those are principles. and they have to be respected, you know. So thank you so much for this time, dear Jimena. And yes, I'm open to your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angel, for this very engaging and amazing presentation. Before I give the word to Aiko, I would like to remind the people in the audience to write their questions in the chat. If they have any comments or anything they would like to say, please feel free to use the chat, and I will read your questions or comments to Angel and Aiko during the Q&A question. So, Aiko, the floor is yours. Thank you, Angel. I have questions, but I'll ask them later.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation, Angel. Yes, I already know a little bit about the work of Yahat and Unum because I was working with them for a few months. And before I start with my questions, I want to tell a little anecdote why the work of Guatemalan people in the field with Yahat and Unum is very important. I was once on a field trip with Yahat and Unum in Estonia, and there was this fellow young Guatemalan photographer, Abner Garcia, and often the witnesses which we interviewed during this trip asked us where we came from, and I could see that they were amazed to see that there are people who care about the Holocaust in their country and their city and their village. And so I think this is not the one way that Yahat and Unum is putting a project and then like they do in the work in Guatemala. It is kind of an exchange of ideas. And this brings me to my first question. Angel, maybe you can tell us something about the exchange of idea of work and experience between Guatemalan researchers, photographers, pedagogues who already worked with Yahat and Unum.
Well, yes.
Angel, I'm sorry, before you start, I'm sorry, can you stop sharing the screen, please?
I'm sorry. Yes, I can.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. So the director of Yahat and Unum is Guatemalan, which is something very surprising. We have some Guatemalans working at Yahat in Paris, and photographers, yes, we have wonderful photographers like Villanueva or Christian. Freddie Murphy is another of our Guatemalan photographers who traveled to Europe to work with Yahat and Unum in the field trips, the field work, about investigating, taking pictures of the witnesses. And we had a webinar, you can see it on our webpage, mdh.org.gt. You can see one of the webinars that was made with photographers of Guatemala in Europe, and they were sharing all their experiences, how different it was, how the cultural shock was, and also, of course, the surprise of these European people when they said Guatemala, because they didn't even know where Guatemala was probably, or had no idea, And the same thing happens with Guatemala and Latvia, or Letonia, as it is called in Spanish, So yes, it is a very challenging thing. We are working together. We are exchanging ideas in order to adapt, all this content that Yahat has with the Latin American mentality and with misconceptions they may get from some of the things that happened in the Holocaust. And of course, the context has a lot to do with this, the historical context. Remember that Guatemala also had a verdict of genocide. I don't know if I answered your questions. I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you. That was a good answer. So you already said in the last sentence that Guatemala had also a troubled history with genocide. And so when I was thinking about the question, I just thought, what approaches does the museum take in Holocaust education and more generally in genocide prevention to create a link between Guatemalan history and the Holocaust? Because I can imagine that it's very difficult for pupils and students who are the multipliers of the educational work to get a good entry into this difficult topic.
Well, it is yes, it's a sensitive topic, you see, because yes, you speak about genocide in Guatemala and 10 people jump around, you know, saying that it didn't happen, and 10 people jump around saying it did happen, you know, so it's still a very alive kind of situation, you see, and it hurts people. And so you have to be very, very careful when you talk about those topics in a country like Guatemala. However, of course, there is also Casa de la Memoria, that's another museum that has this mission. The mission is to talk about the internal conflict in Guatemala that resulted on, yes, the verdict of genocide. And so we are presenting the Holocaust, you know, but the Holocaust in a way to understand it humanly as a model. I mean, what do I mean as a model? I mean the characteristics that gave birth to the Holocaust, like, for example, prejudice, you know, propaganda, in this case, in the internet today, you know, also racism. Yes, it's very strong in Guatemala between, you know, who they call the Latinos, who are the mixture with the Spanish, and the indigenous people. There's a lot of racism. There is reverse racism from them to the other people. So it's a very complicated society in that case. However, our work is to show that all of us are human, all of us are here, all of us are Guatemalan, all of us have the same rights, you know, the same papers. We would have the same passport if we did, you know, we have the same ID, we have the same rights, and we should respect, you know, the principle of oneness is a principle that we apply a lot. You know, you and I may have different ideas, but that doesn't mean that with respect for those ideas, yours and mine, we can sit and talk. We don't need to throw stones at each other, you know. And then, yes, there is a work via conversation, you know, via talking, you know, instead of violence. Violence will give you more violence, you know, and not a solution at all.
Thank you. And question, what organizations and government entities support the museum's work, and does the museum succeed in working with the local community across classes?
Well, yes, I have to say that some foundations are basic for us, you know. We have the Seed the Dream Foundation, we have the Cummings Foundation, we have specific families, you know, like the Spinner family, the Tenenbaums and Taruns, who are Jewish family, Dr. Alex Roth, Patty Osvit. So we have some people who help us, you know, and hopefully we will get more people, because as I said, this is a cry for help in some ways, Aiko, and I want you to understand this. When I say a cry of help, I mean, yes, Latin America is the perfect field for anti-Semitism, and it's very close to a sort of genocide in our societies. You know, we see the violence escalating, we see anti-Semitism escalating in countries like us, who never had those kinds of manifestations or protests or whatever, you know. But yes, we have help, and also, of course, the embassy, the embassy of Israel helps for some things, the Jewish community, and the Ministry of Education, and the National Police has even helped us sometimes when it's necessary.
Thank you very much. I think there's only one last question for me left because you already answered a lot of questions which I plan to ask. What projects are planned for the future?
Well, actually, the future is molded by the necessities of people. You see, when a museum responds, it has to respond to the necessities of others, you see, and that's how we came to this conclusion that we had to speak, and this is one of our programs, about contemporary anti-Semitism in order to understand it, because remember, they are confusing between, the state of Israel, Palestine, all these things with the Holocaust. I mean, there is no point. A lot of misunderstanding, a lot of misconception, and of course, the media to use responsibly, the internet, look for the source, try to see that it is real, it is true. And it is not taking you to a different kind of reality. But yes, contemporary anti-Semitism is one. Anti-Semitism in Latin America is another program. Of course, we will continue with the training of teachers, because remember that teachers are in contact with all the students, and of course, wonderfully, hopefully, really, God willing, we will be able to open, and yes, when we open, of course, we will have a lot of activities that we have planned in order to involve, the indigenous community, in order to involve the artistic community, and also the social community in general, now we have help from lawyers, from psychologists, in order to cover this 6-month program, which was very, very strong.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aiko.
Thank you, Aiko. Thank you, Angel. Are there any questions from the audience? So while you think, I have one comment and one question. I think your work is really amazing, Angel, because I am from Latin America too, and I study museums, and I don't think, I mean, there's only another Holocaust museum that I know of in Latin America, and it's in Mexico, but I don't hear about any other Holocaust museums in the region, and I think that's truly important. With the memory turn, like in the 90s, there was like an explosion of memory museums in Latin America, and there's a lot of them, which are very important, but this is specifically of the Holocaust are not, and I think it's really important because of what you just said about the violence we live in our countries, that unfortunately it's growing again. So I think it's like a very important thing that you do. And that's a comment. And my question is, it's because I really don't know, you make the difference about Holocaust by bullets. I don't know what you mean exactly by Holocaust by bullets.
Okay, the Holocaust by bullets is, well, the final solution came later, with Auschwitz and Belzec and all these places where were actually camps, death camps, for the Jews and the other, of course, the other people who were persecuted. But now the Holocaust by bullets, as the word tells you, it was a massive shooting of population in Eastern Europe, and not only in Eastern Europe, but mostly what we are studying right now is Eastern Europe, because that was undiscovered kind of place, you see, like we didn't know about those places. But of course, the Holocaust by bullets, what I mean is a Nazi shooting one Jew, using bullets as a bullet, to kill a Jew, that is what I mean, multiplied by 10,000, 7,000, or even 7 people around all Eastern Europe and in Europe, because we have to think that this happened from day one to the last day. I mean, it started before Auschwitz even existed, you see, like the ghettos, you know, these ghettos where they were all imprisoned, you know, in their own cities, you know, like Warsaw or other cities that are in Europe, and how they were treated. You know, the death of the Jews had many causes, you know, hunger, you know, cold. They didn't have food, especially when they were in ghettos. But with the Holocaust by bullets, it was a specific organized persecution, you see, of Jewish population in all of Eastern Europe. And why is Eastern Europe so important? Because they had a huge population of Jewish at the time. So of course, the idea was to eliminate them, you know, by shooting them massively and going town by town by town, you know, on trucks. And that's what I meant with the Eisen group. And that was the specific group that they decided to delegate to commit these crimes. However, we know that other people, collaborators, if we want to call it that way, helped, like Ukrainians, Romanians, sometimes because they were afraid, sometimes because they were forced, and sometimes because they believed. You see, that makes us go to the nature of humanity, you know, of mankind, you know, and wonder how could you, some of them were not Nazis. You see my point? I mean, some of the perpetrators were not Nazis, were just collaborating with these people. They didn't know Hitler. I mean, Hitler was never there. You see? Some people have this wrong idea that Hitler was at Auschwitz, you know, walking around, seeing that they kill all the Jews. No, that didn't happen. You know, he had a lot of people around. I mean, it was a whole population that we could call the Nazis, the perpetrators, and they helped. And they were lawyers, they were doctors, they were not ignorant people, you know, they were people, scientists, you know, that helped to do all these organized killing fests that they had.
Thank you, Angel. If I may, I have another question.
Yes.
Do you have in the museum like some kind of educational project or initiative to address precisely the people who are deniers of the Holocaust? How would you kind of address that kind of audience?
That is a difficult question, really, Jimena, because deniers usually are people who show a lot of ignorance about the topic. I mean, I was standing at Auschwitz, you know. Unfortunately, I took that decision one day, many years ago. It was one of my most horrible experiences. And I was as shocked as many people because I wondered, how can humans do this to humans? I mean, it was not a war. It was this organized mind, this organized cerebral kind of work, you know, this almost perfect killing machine based on racism. You see my point? So when people say it didn't happen, they are playing victims. The Jews are playing victims, you know, because they even talk about Zionists, you know, the lords of Zion, you know, and talk about those things about global empowering and global control. And they even said that COVID was created by the Jewish. I mean, when we see all these things, the only thing I can say is I was there, I stood there, I felt the energy there. And I can tell you one thing, Jimena, I never want to experience that again. So to anyone who denies the Holocaust, I would say, please travel before you say something. Go and see with your own eyes and then tell me it didn't happen.
Yes, thank you, Angel. I ask you that because some years ago I went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and they were having a very aggressive campaign for the public to show them that the Holocaust actually had happened. And I was very surprised that they had to be doing that, like proving people that that actually happened. It was very mind-blowing for me. So, but apparently there's still a part of population that thinks that way, and I think that's a very, that initiatives like your museum and educational programs have to be out there to address those kinds of people.
You know, for Latin America, we have to start with number one. You see, it's like, first of all, understand what the Holocaust is, you know. Second, understand who a Jew is. Yeah. Third, understand who a Nazi was, because it's not a German. I mean, it's a Nazi, you know. Nazis are not Germans. Germans are not, they were in Germany, but not all Germans are Nazis. I mean, we have to also be true, you know. I mean, we are not against Germany today. I mean, we have to see everything in context. You know that as a historian, you know, we have to go to the context, the historical context. So, of course, we're talking about something that happened 76 years ago. Yes. Is it still present in us? Yes. Could you be Hitler, Jimena? Yes. Could I be Hitler? Yes. If the situation was the same. What I mean is humans respond as humans are, and we are as capable of being good as we are as capable of being criminals. And they proved that after the Nuremberg executions, you know, and when they studied, you know, the brains and the psychiatrists and all this work, you know, to prove they were monsters. There was something wrong with their brains. And the truth was that they had no answer. You know, they had no conclusion. The conclusion is that humans create this and humans are responsible for this. So by denying this, you are becoming part of the problem and not part of the solution. So of course, programs like the program of Museo del Holocausto Guatemala are very important because we go to human nature to show them and show us what we are capable of, because we cannot turn Hitler into a Martian monster that came, you know. He was a human being. Of course, he was eloquent, you know, he could speak very well, he could convince very well, but of course, you have to let yourself be convinced. You see my point? I mean, I can listen to anyone to tell me anything, you know, God doesn't exist, God is a woman, you know, all these things that are around. But it's me, it's my decision. I decide what to believe. Now, to deny history, it only shows your own ignorance. You know, go there. If you are really a denier, a very aggressive denier, go to Auschwitz, go to Belzec, go to Russia, go to the Soviet Union, to Eastern Europe. Really walk, really feel that. Listen to the testimonies and be standing there, because really my best experience in that was standing at Auschwitz, you know, looking at the crematory, trying to imagine what these people felt, the lies. You know, we're taking you to Palestine, we're only taking a shower, you know, killing your children, taking them from your arms, you know, in front of you, turning you naked, you know, maybe raped and then killed. Of course, some of them wanted to be killed because everything, every reason to live was killed. Their parents, their husbands, their children, everything they had to live for. And that's what we call a dehumanization. Of course, there had to be dehumanization also in the perpetrators, you know, and that's why they changed the strategy, because the Holocaust by bullets was having horrible effects on the Eisen group and the Nazis. I mean, it is impossible for a human being to kill 1,000 people and maybe, I don't know, 200 children and go to bed at night and sleep, you know? So they went to alcohol, to drugs, sometimes they killed themselves, all these stories about the Nazis too, you know? So they had to find a more special way to kill in order to protect their Nazi friends, you know, or soldiers. And that was the chambers, of course. You wouldn't see them, you know? They were just marching into those rooms to take a shower of death.
Thank you very much, Angel. I open again the space for any questions or comments from the audience. If you have any, I don't know, anything to ask Angel or Aiko, or a comment or whatever you feel like. So if there's no any more questions, I would just like to thank Angel del Valle and Aiko Hillen for accepting this invitation on behalf of the Federation for Public History. I will invite you to our next event that will take place on November 10th. It's about public history in Ghana. It's a totally different topic. And I would also like to remind you that not only I am open, but the Federation is open to any kind of events or initiatives. If you want to do an event with us, just get in touch with me. My name is Jimena Perry, and we will be happy to do an event related to public history with you. And thank you very much, everybody, for coming. I'm going to stop the recording now.